What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, and today we are talking a bit of history about the Baldur's Gate franchise, specifically the video games. And the main thing I want to answer today, if you were curious, is why did it take 20 years between Baldur's Gate 2 for us to actually get an official Baldur's Gate 3? The answer to that question is incredibly convoluted and involves a lot of legal drama over the couple decades here, which we are going to get into. Now, we are of course going to be talking about the game still, but the main focus of this video is the history behind the development of these games, as well as, again, all these legal battles that took place in the last 2 decades, and just all the corporate nonsense that went on that eventually got us to Larian Studios developing Baldur's Gate 3. To start this off, let's talk about the first 2 Baldur's Gate games. I'm pretty familiar with both of them. I've made content for both of them for this channel. I have reviews for both the enhanced editions that are pretty long, and because of that, we're not going to be talking like each game individually, step by step, but we're going to be talking more about their development. Development on the original Baldur's Gate game was started in 1995 by BioWare. Now, it was being published by a company owned by Interplay known as Black Isle Studios. Baldur's Gate 1 was eventually released on December 21st, 1998. Something that I always think is interesting about this particular subject is that the initial sales goals for the original Baldur's Gate were very low. They expected to sell 200,000 copies globally, just period. Baldur's Gate 1 sold about 175,000 copies in its first month, and in its first 5 years, it sold about 2.2 million copies, so vastly beat out expectations. Was wildly popular, one of the best-selling games from the time of its release to about the time of its expansion, Tales of the Sword Coast actually, which was also developed by BioWare. Now, we're not going to get too much into the specifics of development, as this is more a history lesson than the individual elements of the development cycle that went into each game. We know that the Baldur's Gate games were using a modified version of the Advanced Dungeons & Dragons rule set, and in selling very well, Baldur's Gate 1 was credited with kind of reviving the computer role-playing genre at the time, and things that were often praised with it were the customization options for your character, the replayability that gave you, all of the art for the pre-rendered backgrounds is honestly even today very pretty. But then, not even 5 months later, Tales of the Sword Coast was released on April 30th, 1999. This was also developed by BioWare, published by the same people, which goes on through Baldur's Gate 2. Tales of the Sword Coast expanded upon the first game a little bit, added some new areas, Durlag's Tower, the Wolfware Island, and then Baldur's Gate 2 was actually released in 2000, followed up very quickly by Throne of Bhaal on June 22nd, 2001. Now, Baldur's Gate 2 basically focused upon improving aspects of the first game, widening out the possibilities for character creation, classes, higher levels of play, fighting more fantastical monsters, more of an emphasis on romance and your party in the game, which the first game had, but was less realized than in the second game. All of these factors combined to make these games incredibly popular. Considered some of the best of their time, considered some of the best to date even in some circles. Now, that was in 2001, so why wasn't there a follow-up? Well, there was initially a planned follow-up. There was a game originally planned called Baldur's Gate 3: The Black Hound. This actually had nothing to do with the Ballspawn saga of the first 2 games, but was using the Baldur's Gate name, which is especially hilarious to me because people talk about Baldur's Gate 3 that's currently in development not being a Baldur's Gate game, when the original Baldur's Gate 3 that they tried to develop literally had nothing to do with the first 2 games. But interestingly enough, Josh Sawyer actually worked on this particular title for a little bit before it was canceled. The engine that was developed to make this title was actually then used on the Van Buren project, which was a canceled Fallout game shortly after. Now, Black Isle Studios, the publisher that worked under Interplay, ultimately went under during this time. Just several failed games, several failed business ventures, a lot of reasons, but ultimately Black Isle Studios went under more or less after the Dark Alliance games were made for console around 2001 and 2004. Snowblind Studios actually made those 2 games. And then the next releases for Baldur's Gate were the enhanced editions of 2012 and 2013. But I promised legal drama, and I will deliver. So, what actually happened here, besides Black Isle Studios going under, that caused us to not see this game for decades? Well, it would be very easy to think that, maybe they were just picky about choosing a developer. And while that's a little bit of it later on, definitely not the case early on, though. First of all, we have to explain a few things. Dungeons & Dragons was originally created by a company called TSR, Tactical Studies or something like that. TSR went under and was actually bought by Wizards of the Coast in 1997. Wizards of the Coast then, of course, gained all the rights to Dungeons & Dragons. However, it still used the TSR branding until the launch of 3rd edition D&D in 2000. But at this point, Wizards of the Coast effectively owned all the rights to these games. That said, Wizards of the Coast was then bought by Hasbro in 1998. Wizards of the Coast mostly retained its autonomy in terms of its operations. However, they were owned by Hasbro, which is important because Hasbro had other subsidiaries, one of them being Hasbro Interactive, which handled the digital rights for Dungeons & Dragons. That is to say, the video games, not the printed stuff, but the video games, and other digital media, but primarily the video games for the purposes of this video. Hasbro, in 2001, needed cash, so Hasbro sold Hasbro Interactive to a company called, I think it's Infogrames. I do not know how to pronounce that at all. It's spelled a ridiculous way. This company actually owned Atari, which gave Atari the digital rights to the games for a while. Now, this ultimately changed in 2005 when Hasbro bought back some of the rights from Atari. However, at the same time, Hasbro gave Atari the rights to publish the D&D games for the next 10 years. This was actually extended to 2017, a bit later. It's mostly speculative on my part, but the initial relationship of this was clearly not a friendly one, and it seems like Hasbro needed to sell some things to make some cash in 2001, regretted that decision, and then tried to buy those rights back, but only got some of them back from Atari, and it is a whole mess there. Again, we're still just talking about the digital rights here. Now, that said, Atari had a licensing agreement with Hasbro at this point to use the digital rights for these games. In 2009, while owning 4 subsidiary companies that were working on different D&D projects, Atari sold those subsidiaries to Namco Bandai. This was a direct violation of Hasbro's licensing agreement, and Hasbro at this point sued Atari over it. Now, in 2011, Atari lost this lawsuit. This gave Hasbro the digital rights to these games back completely. However, Atari was allowed to continue the stuff they had basically already started. And then we saw the enhanced editions that had already been announced, then released. We got the Baldur's Gate 1 Enhanced Edition in 2012 and the Baldur's Gate 2 Enhanced Edition in 2013. However, there was still some more legal drama after this with Atari's publishing rights over these games because Atari, I guess, didn't expect the Enhanced Editions to do as well as they did, and they got involved in more drama that was eventually resolved around the Enhanced Editions, which was a bit of a mess. Now, the Enhanced Editions themselves were developed by a company called Beamdog. Beamdog actually owns another company called Overhaul Games, which actually did a lot of the work. But Beamdog is often seen as the person who made those games, but sometimes you'll hear about Overhaul Games working on them. So just to clear up any confusion, that's why I'm mentioning that. Now, a few years later, in 2016, we got the Siege of Dragonspear edition to Baldur's Gate 1, which kind of bridged the gap in the story between Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2. This was also made entirely by Beamdog with a license from Wizards of the Coast, who had essentially been given the rights back to their digital games at this point. Some more history. In 2014, Larian Studios had just released Divinity Original Sin 1. They actually approached Wizards of the Coast asking for the license to Baldur's Gate 3 so they could make that game. At the time, Wizards of the Coast, while interested, felt that Larian Studios was too much of a fresh-faced developer to be trusted with a license like that they had basically just gotten back. Fast forward a couple years, Larian is releasing Divinity Original Sin 2. Prior to the release, Wizards of the Coast was so impressed by what they had seen in the pre-release materials that they reached back out to Larian and were like, hey, are you still interested in doing Baldur's Gate 3? Of course, Larian said yes, and then prepared a pitch. About the same time that Divinity Original Sin 2 was being released, Wizards of the Coast granted approval for Larian Studios to then work on Baldur's Gate 3. Now, this was in 2017, and Baldur's Gate 3 itself was announced on, I believe it was June 6th in 2019. And of course, in present day, Baldur's Gate 3 is in early access and is shaping up pretty well, recently got a big patch, and Larian Studios is hoping for a 2022 release. But there you go, guys. Honestly, just kind of a short history of all of the nonsense legal drama that went into the Baldur's Gate franchise and why it took 20 years from the release of one game to get to the next game, which for the most part, if you really want to boil it down, came down to corporate incompetence. Now these days, Hasbro is very much so interested in publishing more Wizards of the Coast Dungeons & Dragons stuff, simply because the popularity of 5th edition D&D, which released in 2014, I believe originally, and has since absolutely exploded. So, 5th edition D&D has turned into a gigantic franchise of what was already a popular thing. And now, because of that, Hasbro has a ton of interest in releasing basically as many quality games as they can, which is why we're getting all sorts of remakes, Baldur's Gate 3, as well as apparently several other unannounced projects that we haven't heard about yet. But after what was essentially a decade plus of nonsense with the rights to the digital games of the Baldur's Gate franchise, as well as D&D in general, it seems like the consumer, after this has all finally been resolved, might actually get to see some quality Dungeons & Dragons games. Now, of course, there are other Dungeons & Dragons games I did not mention. These were primarily the side projects that were actually developed while Atari and things actually held the license to those games. So this is why we saw things like Neverwinter Nights, Neverwinter Nights 2, the Neverwinter MMO. So it's not like they've done nothing with the franchise by any means, but Baldur's Gate 3 itself always just seemed to fall by the wayside, and that's kind of just the general history of why it took so long. But there you go, guys. There is a computer game history lesson for you. This is a franchise that I personally find myself playing and thinking about quite often, and I'm hoping that maybe there are people out there who find this story as interesting as it is ridiculous as I find it. But regardless of any of that, thank you for watching, especially if you listen to this whole video of me explaining what is incredibly dry legal stuff between corporations. But there you go, question answered. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to like, comment, subscribe. Most of what I usually do is review games and make guides for CRPGs, so if that sounds interesting to you, subscribe. But honestly, thank you so much for watching anyways. May you wander in wisdom, and have an amazing day.